Ghost of Yotei is almost here, and the reviews are rolling in. Some critics are calling it a stunning, emotionally charged sequel that builds on everything that Ghost of Tsushima did so well. Others see it as a polished but familiar follow-up that doesn't always take big risks. And so today, I'm breaking down what people are saying so far. The positives, the negatives, and the middle ground, so by the end, you know exactly where Ghost of Yotei stands with the critics. Let's dive right in. Okay, so one of the strongest through lines across nearly every review is just how well Atsu's story lands. Unlike Jin Sakai in Ghost of Tsushima, Atsu isn't a samurai or noble warrior. She's an outsider, an orphan turned mercenary, scarred by grief and driven by revenge. Critics say that difference is huge. It strips away the lofty samurai codes and instead grounds the story into something more human. GameSpot described her arc as fragile, emotional, and unflinchingly personal. Rather than debating honor or tradition, Atsu's journey is about loss, survival, and the heavy price of vengeance. And the Washington Post went further, saying her perspective avoids myth-making and instead, it dwells on regret and resilience. And that tone runs throughout the game, less about legend, more about personal cost. And then there's the world itself. Hokkaido, or Izo, is the backdrop, and reviewers can't stop praising it. Snow-covered ridges, frozen lakes, fog-draped forests, and villages that feel both alive and haunted, critics are calling it one of the most atmospheric open worlds in years. The Verge said exploration feels like uncovering secrets, not checking boxes, a deliberate contrast to open worlds that drown players in icons. And combat also gets high marks. The core mechanics will feel familiar to Tsushima players, stance-based duels, precise parries, stealth options, but Yotei sharpens the blade. New stances, smoother transitions, and a wider set of weapons make fights more dynamic. Game Informer praised the bounty system in particular. Early on, Atsu writes the names of her enemies, the Yotei 6, onto parchment using the DualSense touchpad. Later, after defeating each one, you physically cross their name off. And now it's a small mechanic, but reviewers say it adds weight, making victories feel personal. Kurosawa mode returns, but now you can switch to Miike mode for a bloodier, grittier filter, or Watanabe mode for anime-inspired stylization. And GameSpot called it a love letter to Japanese cinema and anime. And it doesn't change the mechanics, but it lets players decide if their journey feels cinematic, brutal, or stylish. And finally, there's polish. Performance was a big question mark leading up to release, but most reviewers agree that Ghost of Yotei is technically solid. Digital Foundry confirmed that PS5 Pro maintained 60 FPS with ray tracing, and critics noted only minor stutters or glitches. And so add in strong audio design, the clash of steel, the crunch of snow, the mournful soundtrack, and reviewers say that Yotei feels complete on day one. And so on the positive side, a powerful protagonist, a breathtaking world, refined combat, stylish flexibility, and technical polish, that is a lot to celebrate. But of course, it's not all glowing. Ghost of Yotei has its fair share of criticisms, and several are echoed across multiple reviews. The biggest one is predictability. While Atsu's personal arc feels grounded, the revenge-driven narrative doesn't break much new ground. Radio Times summed it up bluntly. If you've seen one orphan avenging their parents' death, you've seen them all. IGN called it a predictable but well-executed story, noting that while the emotional beats hit, the overall structure is easy to see coming. And side content also drew mixed reactions. Some bounty hunts stand out, but others feel formulaic. A few outlets criticize missions that amount to kill the leader in this camp or clear out group of enemies, which feel like padding in a game otherwise praised for tight focus. MMORPG went so far as to rate the side content a 7 out of 10, saying too many quests lacked impact. And another sticking point is the camera. Multiple critics flagged that in crowded fights, the camera sometimes struggles to keep enemies in view. And you'll find yourself adjusting to it manually mid-duel, which isn't ideal in a game where precision timing is everything. And it doesn't ruin combat, but it can definitely break immersion. And while performance is mostly strong, a handful of reviewers noted small technical hiccups. GameSpot mentioned shader stutters at launch, though most were patched quickly, and others saw occasional odd animations or pathfinding bugs. And so nothing game-breaking, but enough to remind you it's still a massive open world release, but I'm sure that it was going to get patched anyways, either in the next couple weeks, next couple months, who knows. I'm sure it's not that big of a deal. But in short, the main criticisms focus on a safe narrative, uneven side quests, and occasional technical quirks. And now what's really interesting about Ghost of Yotei is where critics are split, because these are the elements that come down to personal taste. The first is pacing. Some reviewers praised Yotei's more intimate scope, calling it refreshing after Tsushima's sprawling mythic journey. Others felt it played too safe, missing the grandeur of its predecessor. And so if you want an epic about building legends, Tsushima might still hold the crown. But if you prefer something more grounded and emotional, Yotei's tighter focus might feel like a strength. And now difficulty is another dividing line. Some critics loved the stricter stamina system and scarcer resources, saying it made duels feel more dangerous and survival more urgent. Others found it frustrating, complaining that it forced too much backtracking and scavenging. And for one player, it's tension, and for another, it's tedious. And side content lands in the middle as well. One reviewer highlighted a moment where a wolf companion unexpectedly intervenes to save Atsu, calling it one of the game's most memorable sequences. But others said standout missions like that are rare, and too many errands blur together. And so depending on your perspective, Ghost of Yotei is either refreshingly focused or too cautious, either thrillingly tense or frustratingly punishing. And so that is where the split comes in. And while the critics set the stage, the early community voices help round out the picture. On forums and Reddit, players echo a lot of the same points reviewers raised. Atmosphere is the biggest win. Posts describe Hokkaido as the most atmospheric setting that Sucker Punch has ever built, with fans praising how fog, snow, and sound design combine to create something haunting and immersive. Atsu herself is also getting strong reactions. Players say her outsider's perspective feels like a welcome shift from Jin's samurai lens, giving the game a different tone and personality. But the repetition comes up here as well. Several posts mention that after 15 to 20 hours, the revenge-driven structure can start to feel familiar, especially if you're clearing side content aggressively. Others point to minor bugs, enemies clipping into walls, small animation hiccups, the kind of stuff that critics flag but the fans notice in moment-to-moment play. And so the community largely aligns with critics. A gorgeous, polished game with a strong lead, but not without its rough edges. And here's the big question. How does Ghost of Yotei stack up against Ghost of Tsushima? On one side, many critics argue that Yotei surpasses its predecessor in polish. The combat is sharper, the world is denser, and the narrative is more emotionally resonant. Some outlets even claimed Yotei beats Tsushima in every single category. But others disagree. They argue that while Yotei is technically stronger, it doesn't carry the same mythic weight. Tsushima was about the birth of a legend, a sweeping story of honor and betrayal. Yotei is smaller, more personal, and more grounded. So whether that's better or worse depends entirely on what kind of story that you prefer. And so it's less about which game is objectively better and more about which tone resonates more with you. Epic grandeur or intimate revenge. And so where does this all leave us? Well, Ghost of Yotei is, according to critics and early players, a polished, emotionally charged sequel that builds confidently on Ghost of Tsushima's foundation. It shines with a strong protagonist, a breathtaking setting, refined combat, and technical polish. And at the same time, its revenge-driven story plays things a little safe, side content can be uneven, and camera quirks sometimes get in the way. And so if you love Tsushima, it seems like you'll almost certainly enjoy Yotei. If you're hoping for something radically different, you may see why some reviewers call it familiar. But taken on its own terms, Ghost of Yotei looks like one of PlayStation's most compelling exclusives this year. And so my overall question is, what do you think so far? Do the reviews make Ghost of Yotei a must-play for you, or are you waiting to see how players respond once the full launch hits? Let me know in the comments down below. Would definitely love to hear your thoughts. And if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button if you're new, as I will continue to make more gaming news videos just like this one. Until next time.